We are at the beginning of the 5th century in the Roman Empire. The fantastic boom of the time of Caesar or Augustus is long gone. The empire is in chaos, one emperor succeeds another. Sometimes 2 and at one time even 4 reign at once. Most of them become victims of constant civil wars. We are simply at a time when the ancient world of civilization is in its last campaign. Problem number 1 is the huge area. In 395, the empire was divided into Western and Eastern, with the center in Constantinople. But even that did not help. Defending thousands of kilometers of borders on 3 continents was increasingly difficult, almost impossible. So it became more and more common for so-called barbarians to be recruited into Roman units. All the surrounding inhabitants of non-Roman origin, especially members of Germanic tribes. In the 5th century, the Roman legions were de facto composed only of barbarians. This is where problem number 2 comes from. The Romans considered the barbarians to be inferior citizens, despite their services. Bullying, lynching, and mass pogroms were not uncommon. They were also mocked for their fashion. They wore trousers, which was completely unimaginable for the Romans in togas. The time must come when the barbarians will no longer tolerate this. And out of nowhere, problem number 3 appeared. Perhaps the biggest one. At the end of the 4th century, hordes of warriors from Asia arrived at the borders of the empire. The Huns, the tribe for whom the Chinese probably built the Great Wall of China, turned to Europe. And it caused a complete whirlwind here, which would later be called the migration period. On this map, you can see what a whirlwind of movements the Huns caused among European tribes. All this will be too much for the crumbling Roman colossus. So let's go in order. It all started with the king of the Germanic tribe Visigoths, Alaric. The Huns plundered their homes on the Black Sea, so the Visigoths asked for asylum within the Roman Empire in what is now Bulgaria. They were granted asylum, but other promises were not kept. Alaric then rose up, besieged Constantinople, and defeated the Romans in the Great Battle of Adrianople. Even Emperor Valens himself died here. 32 years later, in 410, Alaric and his army stood at the gates of Rome itself. He conquered and plundered it. The Eternal City had not experienced such humiliation for 800 years. However, the empire itself lived on because the capital with the emperor and the state administration was already in Ravenna at that time. Alaric died a few months after the conquest of Rome, but he had capable followers. This is a man named Geiseric, who is the king of another Germanic tribe, the Vandals. His life clearly shows the turmoil that was taking place in Europe at that time. He was born near Lake Balaton in what is now Hungary. As a boy, he experienced a Hun invasion, and so on New Year's Eve in 406, his tribe illegally crossed the frozen Rhine, which formed the border of the Roman Empire. The Vandals then plundered Roman Gaul for several years, before they were pushed into Hispania and further into them. Thus, Geiseric finds himself at the Strait of Gibraltar. The Vandals surprisingly quickly mastered the skill of building ships, and in the number of about 80,000 people they crossed the Mediterranean Sea. Then we remember Geiseric, born near Balaton, conquers North Africa, led by the magnificent city of Carthage. He makes it his capital. He also takes part of the Roman fleet here, and as the icing on the cake, he occupies Sicily, Sardinia, Corsica, and the Balearic Islands. Victory was sweet. The Romans had no chance of doing anything to the Vandals, so in 442, they recognized their rule over Africa. The Vandals began to wear Roman uniforms, and it seemed that everything was settled, but it wasn't. We move to Ravenna, still the capital. Here they are deciding what to do with the barbarians. In the north, they are fighting the Huns in Gaul, the Franks in Spain, the Swabian Alans, and the Vandals in Africa. As usual, however, intrigues reign at the imperial court like from a soap opera, a very bloody soap opera. The main military leader of the empire, Aetius, is killed by Emperor Valentinianus. Emperor Valentinianus, in turn, is killed not long after by Senator Petronius Maximus. Maximus himself becomes emperor and forces Valentinianus's widow to marry him, but she will do everything to take revenge on Maximus. and literally everything. He sends a letter to Geiseric in Africa asking for help. He is said to open the gates of Rome to him. Geiseric does not hesitate, and on June 2nd, 455, he stands before the gates of the Eternal City. Here a memorable scene occurs. No armed man stands in his way, but Pope Leo I himself. He at least asks Geiseric to spare the inhabitants of Rome, and in the end he is granted his request. Geiseric and his army enter the city and plunder it mercilessly for 14 days. With a few exceptions, they do not kill the local people or burn the city, which is unusual for that time. The newly made emperor, Maximus, tries to escape the city disguised as a peasant, but the crowd recognizes him and kills him. The Vandals in Rome steal what they can, and with enormous wealth and valuable prisoners, in the form of many senators, they return to Carthage. The Eternal City is again humiliated. The symbol of the empire is in ruins. It is clear that one of the most famous episodes in the history of mankind is slowly ending. This will be definitively confirmed 21 years later, when another Germanic chieftain, Odoacer, dethrones the last Roman emperor Romulus Augustus and becomes the first barbarian ruler to take over the rule of Italy. Thus ends the era that will be called antiquity in history, and the wild centuries of the Middle Ages come, during which nations and states, as we know them, today begin to form in Europe. The institution of the emperor for the western part of the empire was formally restored by the Frankish king Charlemagne in 800. The Eastern Roman Empire, later called Byzantium, would survive until 1453, when Constantinople was conquered by the Ottomans. However, the era of the greatest ancient glory definitely ended when the barbarians conquered the once invincible Eternal City.